Welcome to the Pineapple Perspective. I'm your host, Troy Hooper. This is sponsored by Pepper Lunch Restaurants. And today we've got a very cool guest. I call him Scot with one T Turner because he spells the Scot in what is probably the appropriate British way. We put two T's over here on this side of the pond, but it's just been my little call sign for him for a long time. I've known Scot for a little while through the digital world, and I think I'm going to get to see him in person sometime soon. Scot, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Troy. Really pleased to be here, and always getting a chance to sit and chat with you is great time spent. And yeah, in October, I'm going to be at the Bar and Restaurant Expo in San Antonio speaking. So I'm going to jump on a plane over to you, and we're going to hang out, which is going to be fun.
Exciting. I can't wait. This is phygital relationships, right? The digital becomes physical. Met Scot, I think, a couple years ago on the digital hospitality online community. It started in Clubhouse. It's now on LinkedIn every Wednesday and Friday at 10 Pacific. If you're looking for a place to join a community like ours, Scot's from way over the pond on the other side in jolly old England, and he joins us even when it's 8, 9, 10 p.m. his time. He joins us in that community and has built a multinational community coming to America to speak at a conference. Amazing stuff. Scot, so glad you're here. For those that don't know, please tell us about your podcast because I've been so graciously asked to be on, I think, twice now.
Twice, yeah.
Yeah, so tell the world about your podcast a little bit so they can find more about you.
Yeah, for sure. So we have the Hospitality Huddles podcast, and started it probably about a year ago now. Took some time to get into it, and really it was just an opportunity for me to meet really cool people and have a chat about hospitality, which we love. And one of the things that I've loved since kind of setting out on my journey as Auden Hospitality is that whole piece around networking through LinkedIn with people who are way more fun than you, who have got much more knowledge than you, learning from them, taking advice in maybe areas where you're not so skilled yourself, and just applying them to what you do every single day. And if we can help two or three people with that along the way, then even more better than that. So yeah, Hospitality Huddles is the name. As you say, you've been on a couple of times, and we spoke to some other cool people from the digital hospitality team, and a few more cool ones lined up as well. So yeah, go and check that out.
Well, and while we're on the subject of connecting, Scot is probably the most prolific LinkedIn publisher I know. Because I think you do it yourself, right? Or you might have a little help, but Sean Walchef has a team. I have a team. I can't keep up with Sean. He's putting out 2, 3, 4 posts a day. I'm lucky to get 1 to 2 out at any given day. But if you're not following Scot with one T Turner, Auden Hospitality, Auden Hospitality on LinkedIn, you really must. He does a phenomenal job with a newsletter, a very long, thoughtful storytelling that I think gets his points across that are very helpful. But man, every day the list of the 5, 10, 12 things you should or shouldn't do, or people mindset, the way they think, it's just an endless array of thought-provoking topics. And I think things that I hope that if you're a hospitality leader, owner, operator, when you see them, you realize, wow, if I just dug into 1 or 2 or 3 of those things, I could maybe have a big impact on my business. But great content. Please follow Scot on LinkedIn. Scot, we start the show by asking every guest the same couple questions. What does hospitality mean to you?
This is a great question, and I asked the same thing on my podcast as well. So for me, the reason I started asking that question on my podcast was I always felt like hospitality was about creating memories. And when I think about some of the best experiences that I had in my career, whether that was at the guest side of the table or at the operator side of the table, it was always about the pushing the boundaries as quick as possible and as much as possible to create memories that people would want to go and tell their friends and family about. And the reason that it was like that for me was if you're so amazed and you rave about an experience so much that you want to go tell the people you care about the most, then you're doing something right for the guest. And I think that's still today what hospitality means to me. And I've left a couple of roles because I didn't feel like I was still doing that in that particular role. And it was something that's always been my North Star. So it's all about creating memories that people want to tell each other about.
So the follow up is, where did that belief come from? How was that born within you? Tell us a little bit about what created that perspective for you.
Do you know, I think I take it back to when I first had my job in 1998, I think it was. I was 16 years old. I was a silver service waiter in a banqueting hall in my hometown. It was 600 people, and I just loved the buzz that went around delivering large scale events. And when you saw people at the end of the night going home, sometimes they'd had a few too many drinks, but they always had smiles on their faces. It was one of those kind of adrenaline rushes that I've just never been able to quash. And I think if I really look back at that, I think it's probably come from those learning experiences of being 16, 17, 18, and being around some amazing kind of people, some amazing events to deliver great hospitality. I don't think I can probably take it much further back than that. Yeah, in childhood, there was always great experiences. You know, I was lucky enough that I had parents that always took us traveling, so we saw different places. But I think it was that first little touch and little taste of hospitality that really got me hooked on the industry, and I've never thought about doing anything since.
That's amazing. Yeah, once it's in you, right? It's like an addiction or a disease. I don't know which or both, but yeah, I share in that, mindset and sort of that reasoning is, when I think about my job as a leader in hospitality, it has always been to create great experiences for the employee so that they'll in turn create great experiences for the guest. And man, even as a leader, I've had some phenomenal experiences when you look back and say, "Oh, I got to do this, or I got to lead through that, or
Mm,
we survived whatever it was we survived."
yeah,
I've done a 500 person multi course plated dinner with wine service during a live television broadcast,
mm,
where we had to clear the room in 90 or 120 seconds, clear and set the next course, right?
yeah,
It's just absolute insanity.
yeah.
And deliver it with real service, like you say,
Mm,
silver service, white glove service.
mm,
These people were paying thousands of dollars a
yeah,
plate to be in
mm,
that room. And so just because the TV clock was clicking to come back from commercial didn't mean you couldn't give great hospitality and service. So what a phenomenal belief system, because I still tell those stories. I still have those memories. I look back
yeah.
fondly on those challenges, whether we overcome them or learn from them or all the
Mm.
above. So I love that. Scott, to give people context before we get into some of the real meat on the bone of this conversation around some topics, tell everybody a little bit about your background. I think it's a fascinating and phenomenal background in the hotel business, in fine luxury, fine dining. Tell us a little bio on yourself and where you come from to give people context.
Yeah, for sure. So, as we say, I started out silver service waiter, did that for a couple of years, and then really got the buzz for hospitality. Went and did hotel management at university here in the UK in the north of England, and during that time, I had a sandwich year in London. It was the first time I worked in London. We worked at the Marriott Grosvenor Square, which at the time was very different now because now all the UK properties are franchised. At the time, it was the only Marriott or Marriott in the UK that was run by the American business and the
Mm.
ownership group. So we were treated and things that were expected of us were very different. And we had an amazing general manager there who was just old school hospitality. He was the type of guy who used to come round at 9 and 3 every day and shake everyone's hand and ask how they were. And the standards were amazing. We trained in a Michelin star restaurant there as well, which was phenomenal. Came back, finished university, went to go work in a golf resort. And in that golf resort, I was made F&B director at 26. And not only that, but an amazing opportunity. We were taken over by a real forward-thinking hotel group here at the time called Malmaison, and they chose the hotel that I was working in to do the pilot for what they wanted to be the new hotel standard that was rolled out on our group. So large golf hotel, 5 star. We had a couple of restaurants, huge banqueting business there as well. We had a big golf club that delivered quite a big volume. So it was a great kind of throw into senior leadership at quite a young age, was to kind of go through this full redevelopment of the hotel, as well as then doing 156, 160 weddings a year, plus busy restaurants and things like that. So really, really kind of big entry into that. I left that hotel after 6 years. I went and opened a five-star hotel in York, which is in the north of England. From there, went to go work for the Dorchester Collection at their Coworth Park property as F&B director. Again, huge meeting and events business there. We did 2 marquees for 500 people at the same time, which anyone who's done kind of off-site catering and marquee events will know that's no easy task to do. Michelin star restaurant there as well. And then from there, came into central London. I was the hotel manager. We opened the first Intercontinental for 36 years in London. So we opened that property, 256 keys. Again, I was very lucky. I always had large F&B departments. So there we had a big M&E business. So F&B was 50% of the total revenue, which at 256 keys is no mean feat. And it was there where I really kind of took my first pivot in my career. And I got to the position of hotel manager. I wasn't responsible for F&B directly because I had an F&B director. And I just got this burning desire to stay in restaurants and bars. Didn't want to go through the hotel channels anymore, which was always kind of what I thought I wanted to do. And at the time, I was talking to a mentor and kind of saying where I was and what I was thinking. And he was like, well, why don't you come and work for me? I need an ops director. He ran independent restaurants. He was an F&B consultancy. And he said, why don't you come and do it in Dubai? I'm opening an office. Why don't you come and run the operations side of that business? So yeah, working in restaurants was too good to pass up. Working in a foreign country in internationally was too good an opportunity to pass up. So I left. I was operations director for the UAE initially. We had 2 or 3 venues there as well. We operated Asia to Cuba, China Grill on a brand representation basis. Obviously, the listeners from the US will probably know Jeffrey Chodorow and the team there. So we did that for a couple of years. We opened Alan de Casse restaurant in the Kempinski on the Palm as well. And through that time, then we started working internationally as well. So my role broadened. So I worked across 14 countries. We opened a hotel in Montenegro, worked in Beirut, most of the Middle Eastern countries. And at the time, we were invested in by a Saudi investment business. And their whole model was they went into founder-led businesses, very similar to Kiwi as such, went into founder-led businesses, 2 or 3 locations, either didn't have the expertise to scale, didn't have the cash to scale. We went in, and my role as VP of operations at that point was I went in pre-acquisition and looked at the checklist of whether that business was good enough to grow and scale and whether it could be localized in the operating platforms that we operated in, which was New York, London, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. And then once the business was acquired, we would then go in with my team and we would help to put all our systems and policies and procedures in place and really help that business grow. And then we would then almost franchise that business to our own operating platforms, and we would be responsible almost as task force to go in and help get those off the ground and develop. So that was my role up until 2020 when I moved back to the UK. Moved back to the UK as COO, so I moved into the investment office. Moreover, we had 16 brands, 85 restaurants, and each brand had a restaurant GM, and that restaurant GM reported into me. And my role was more about how we kept it on the business plan to exit, because the whole model was grow, scale, and sell, and then bring more brands into the ecosystem. And again, I just kind of got too far away from where I love, which is with teams, with restaurants, with guests, making a difference on the floor. And I was too many times having conversations with investment officers about exit plans. And in 2022, I just thought, this is the time now, 7 years with the business. It's the right time to go and go back to what I love, which was working with, as I mentioned, hoteliers, restaurateurs. And that's when I set up Auden Hospitality. I just got the urge to do my own thing for the first time ever, set up Auden Hospitality. And 2 years on now of the business. And thankfully, touch wood, it's gone from strength to strength. And where we really found our niche was working back in hotels. But what we did was we bring that restaurateur mindset, because as we've both talked about before, hotel F&B is going through a bit of a sticky patch. And I truly believe that in the 15 years of working in hotels, I actually learned more about running restaurants in the 7 years of independent restaurateur and restaurants than I did in the 15 years. So really what we want to do is go back in and share some of those things that we learned across those 7 years working in independent restaurants to get hoteliers to think differently about their F&B. And by doing that, then hopefully we can kind of come out of this sticky patch and start seeing F&B making a big impact in hotels again, because it was once kind of the icons of restaurants and food and beverage in the restaurant industry. And I truly believe we can get back there again.
Yeah, like that's a great segue because, in your presentation of yourself, you mentioned how many of these hotels you went and opened and worked at that had Michelin star restaurants. Like that was a thing. I mean, really until through the early 2000s, maybe. I'm not sure why we have disconnected high quality F&B from great hotels. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a five diamond hotel to have a phenomenally great restaurant in it. Many times, that's one of the attractors, right? You can discover the hotel because you found the F&B outlet first, or vice versa. Tell me, Scott, as you're out there advising and walking clients through all of the potential opportunities around elevating and improving F&B operations and F&B offerings in the hotel space, particularly, what are two or three common themes that you're running into, whether it's the same mindset challenge or the same operational challenge, or maybe it's just the trend of the day that we have to sort of recreate this sort of industry connection. Talk to us about a couple of those thoughts there.
So the first one that I would pick out in terms of what hoteliers are seeing as problems right now is the story of what the F&B proposition is. Too many times we walk into hotels, and when we ask 4 or 5 different team members, we ask 4 or 5 different guests, we get different answers around what that concept or what that outlet venue should be or is. And we do it quite often when we go into new projects, is we ask those questions. What is this concept? Tell us how you would explain this venue to a guest. And we often get different responses that come back all the time. And when that happens, we always start looking at what the story is and how we can put some clarity around it. Because I was always taught if a guest has to think too hard about what that venue or what that restaurant is, they'll walk past it and they'll go to the next one that makes it really easy for them. So it's really important that that story, no matter whether you're a restaurateur, a hotelier, a bakery, a quick service, has that story that people can identify with. So that would be the first one. The second one is one that I think hotels had in the past, and it seems to have lost the way a little bit, which is focusing on the local community. And so many times I walk into hotels and I'll ask GMs, I'll ask F&B leaders, what is your concept? Who are you measuring yourself against? And so many times I get told the hotel down the road, the hotel across the city, because that's what the hotel benchmarks itself against. And it's wrong, because they should be comparing themselves against the guys down the road who their guests are choosing instead of eating in their hotel. And it happens so often. And when I challenge F&B leaders, when I challenge hoteliers to say that, sometimes they look at me as though I've gone crazy because they're so tunnel visioned into what hotels should offer. And I truly believe that if more hoteliers start looking at the local operators and benchmarking themselves against those guys, F&B in hotels would be in a much better place, because those guys are constantly innovating. They're really clear on the story. They tell their story as well. They don't have hotel marketing teams telling that story, that they have dedicated restaurant teams telling that story. So I think it's really important, and it's something we learned when we were managing different brands in the investment business. And I'm sure you've seen this in what you've done, Troy, as well, is we didn't mind if brand GMs went across 2 or 3 brands, because from an operations perspective, it was about delivery, it was about leading people. What we always made sure we had brand appointed marketeers who woke up every single morning and thought, how do I tell the world about this brand, and how do I drive content to be able to do that? And I think it's super important, and it's something I see happening a lot within hotels, that they generalize marketing and the generalize who their benchmark would be against hotels, not against the guys who are winning at the minute, which is the independent restaurants.
Well, and all too often, I think that it's just such an afterthought. It's even seen as a liability. It's an amenity to be subsidized, and it's just not viewed as a standalone business opportunity, which it absolutely can be. It absolutely is. And I think one of the issues is that some of the limited service or lower end full service chains of hotels, would lease out spaces in the ground floor, and it really came down to the quality of what they chose to put in there, the curation of that choice. If even if they weren't running it, did it meet the market? Did it meet the day? And my short story on that, it was Hilton asked me to help curate a new restaurant in a hotel that was just purchased and being rebranded and remodeled, et cetera. And the first thing I did when I sat down, I had to hire a chef, I had to hire an F&B director, I had to hire a full staff, et cetera. But we decided to really spend time on what is the identity, what, as you say, what is the story. And that first thing, and I'm no guru or expert at this point, this is many years ago, but I just looked at the town and said, this is a small tourist town. There's quite a lot of choices for per capita, a massive amount of choices of food and beverage and bars and experiences. And there were only 2 or 3 higher end, maybe 5 higher end, mid tier to higher end restaurants. And we weren't going to meet that criteria. But boy, could we be an elevated casual? And who were we competing with? Well, it never occurred to me that we were competing with another hotel. We're competing with all of the food down the street. There's an endless number of options. You could stay here a week and, not even touch a tenth of them. And so how were we going to convince? And that was the benchmark. Our benchmark was, if we can convince guests from other places, hotels, Airbnbs, vacation homes, etc., if we could get people to come to our restaurant, which happens to be in a hotel, then we have won. We have competed and we have won. The hotel guest is benchmark, right? If you're not capturing a percentage of your hotel guests, then you're just shouldn't be in the business. But beyond that, the hotel guest is not enough to have a profit center that is sustainable, of a high quality offering. And so we had to bring people off the street. Well, we had some advantages. We had a shuttle that just roved the town all day and night to bring people to and from the town, the main part of the town. So we could get people up to us. We could just tell guests, hey, every 20 minutes we're at the corner of X and Y, and please feel free to jump on our shuttle and come up to our restaurant for your reservation. And so that was a very important understanding. And the other one was, we had to be different. We couldn't offer the same thing couldn't just be the next steakhouse, the next Italian, the next thing, right? We had to do something different. So we chose farm to table, farm to fork. And we said, we're going to curate a menu of directly sourced, ranched, regional ingredients. And that took a lot of time. That took a lot of money. That took a lot of effort to go. Our chef went and traveled about, and we made these direct relationships, right? And so it's just about, how are we going to be different, and why are people going to choose us? And forget the fact that you're in a hotel. The hotel is a separate business, as I think you espouse a lot. Good stuff. Scott, talk to us about some examples of things you're working on these days, and the challenges, and maybe some of the wins that you're starting to see. You've been pounding this drum for a bit now, right? About 2 years. And you're really doing a good job of getting the word out. But what is the reality on the ground with your clients? What is the results, and how are you guys overcoming some of these mindset and physical, in some cases, operational challenges too?
Yeah, so what we see quite a bit is that hotels seem to be tunnel visioned in what they've always done and not what the industry is necessarily doing, or they have limitations that slows down process in terms of kind of working with what's currently on trend in the industry right now. So if we go in and start with a few different bits, so we're finding a lot that F&B directors, F&B leaders are quite overwhelmed. They're struggling to be on the floor. Forget the lack of resource, forget the talent side of things. This is kind of process and reporting and hotels still haven't kind of automated that whole process. So we come in and work with the operators to try and help with that. The amount of times we've gone into hotels and they're still doing manual stock takes and spending hours on that type of thing and helping with that. But probably the best example of where we've worked on tech is we did a cafe within a, a country estate, and they had two swimming pools, one outside. It went from 60 covers when the weather wasn't great to 300 covers when the weather was great, and how they could flex up and flex down with that. And one of the biggest issues that we were finding when we're talking to guests was about the length of time they had to wait. There was queues. They were missing out on second drinks because people didn't want to wait time. And we really looked at how we could adopt kind of a beach club mentality and work on QR codes and digital ordering to help reduce that kind of friction for the guest and for the team. So we did that. We're looking at how we can get digital in as much as possible. Room service, a key one. A lot of people are saying right now that room service is going back year on year. Well, that's because it's easier to buy a DoorDash or an Uber Eats than it is to order room service right now. So again, there's some great examples out there of how it can help average check and how it can help order frequency and things like this. What I actually think is it can reduce the friction for the guest and therefore help with that NPS. And back to your point about hotels and how F&B can have such a big part to play, is if you can take away some of those frictions that makes it difficult for guests to buy, then it can really help the overall proposition. The other one we see quite a bit is rules. And, hotels love a good rule. And I shared a post on LinkedIn last week. I was in a five-star hotel waiting for a colleague to come and have a meeting. And I walked in and I saw the restaurant manager supervisor arguing with a guest about charging a laptop in the lounge. And there was no logic around why he wouldn't allow it other than it's restaurant policy. And the
Yeah.
guest just didn't understand. She'd been there all morning. She'd been buying, a check was a decent sized check. And the first thing she said when he'd finished arguing with her was, "Get me the check. I'll just go to somewhere that will." And it's funny. I said she looked at me and she started talking to me across the way. And I said, "Oh, where will you go after this?" She said, "I'll go to a Starbucks." So instead of going to a five-star hotel where she could be comfortable, she could get, an average check that's way above Starbucks, she decided to go to Starbucks. And I think that's just a perfect example sometimes of where hotels put rules and process and what they think they should be above what the guest actually wants. And then they wonder why people are heading to Starbucks and not into lounges. So that's the other one. And then, what do we work on? Other elements that we work on with operators, and this is probably coming into your world with what you're doing right now, is we work on producing operations manuals and service manuals for people. We're doing it with a large global hotel brand right now. We're helping them create service manuals and training programs for their scaling brands. We're having a conversation with a large department store that's very famous here in the UK as well about exactly the same thing. And what they're saying to us is, we're really good at the blue sky stuff. We're really good at openings. We're really good at all that kind of stuff that people love to do, but we forget the detail and we miss it. And we just need some people who can come in and be our guys who are just safe on the ground. So it's funny. We've been working a lot on what our DNA is at the minute. And one of the big anchors of the business is concept development and designing and working on your F&B strategy. The other one is we're going to help do the detail for you as well. So we will come into businesses that need some help with that, and we'll help put systems and structure and support in there exactly like you would if you were wanting to franchise the brand
Right.
or a brand. And that's the other large part of what we're seeing as a real niche within what we do, is that whole piece as well. So yeah, two sides of the business. We obviously do concept development, F&B strategies, where we're looking at opportunities where people can grow, but it's funny, that whole piece around overwhelm and detail right now is the bit that people are really struggling with as well.
Well, when the restaurants operating manuals and systems were written by the hotel,
Yeah,
they usually have a
yeah,
different tact about what their
yeah.
proposition was. Um, so tell me about any trends, or as you're thinking about what you would offer, curate, or suggest in some of these venues. I'm sure location and market and what the venue is actually drives a lot of that. But what are you seeing, or what are you advising, sort of on whole, if you were to pinpoint any trends, any specific direction that seems to be the next or the future of this hotel F&B environment?
I think digitization is number one. I think that's the guest now wants convenience, and convenience comes in tech. And I think a number of hotels are struggling with legacy tech that doesn't make that easy. But instead of worrying about how legacy tech makes it difficult, start worrying about how the guest is feeling in bedrooms, in wanting to make restaurant reservations and wanting that to be part of the overall hotel booking proposition, because it really gets left behind. And then on the flip side of that, how you can get your people back onto the floor by automating tasks. I think about when we were running 85 restaurants in the investment business, we didn't ask our people to do end of day reports. We asked them to write one paragraph, which was a handover on the day, because everything else was consolidated through almost an ERP system we were using called Tenzo. And that also produced a weekly flash for us. It showed us what the payroll cost was at any time. Our people didn't have to try to find data. And I still see that in hotels a lot, that the F&B leaders don't have the data at the fingertips, which helps them make conscious decisions, which means therefore then decisions are by opinion. And that's where we get to diluted stories and things coming on and off menus that maybe aren't quite right from a strategic perspective. So I really encourage anyone, whether that's in restaurants or hotels, to really start look at how you can give your people the power to make decisions through fact and not through opinion. And then the other one is how, you know, I'm working at the minute with a business called Hot Stats, who are a benchmarking company that all the hotels submit their data to. And we're working on a white paper, and we're looking at F&B since 2019 in both the UK and the US. What we're seeing across both markets is that conference and banqueting is in decline. And when I've looked into it and when we've kind of researched this, it's very much around how the hotel banqueting and conference facilities is still very much the same as you would have had probably when we were both working in hotels.
Yeah.
And in the main, it's not evolved. And when people are going into modern offices, they're going into WeWorks, they're going into, Google offices that have got these really cool, like lecture theatre style conference rooms and things like that. When they then come to your hotel and it's carpeted tables with, linen tablecloths on, it just doesn't cut it. So I think the next trend is how we can really start making convention centers within hotels really start matching, if not exceeding, what people can get in offices, so that when they are bringing people out and spend has reduced and people now remotely working means people are together less, they're really looking for an experience that then elevates the proposition that they have back in the office, or because it's a special occasion bringing people together. So I think that's probably the two main ones that we're seeing. There's obviously lots of others with supply chain and labor and things like that right now, but all this data that I see is that things like labor, and this is in the US as well, although I know California's going through some changes at the minute, but is that labor seems to have stabilized. It seems to be kind of on a plateau, which now means you can forecast much better, which means you can run a much more stable business. The same with food cost over here in the UK, where we've had fluctuations with the invasion of Ukraine and things like that. So it's very much now back to really focusing on the guest and revenue, which is what I think is really exciting about the moment we're in right now. Is I think there's a huge opportunity for the hoteliers who want to stand out from the crowd to really start focusing on innovation, to start moving things forwards and kind of booking from the trend, which is everything's kind of doing the same as it always has. And there's huge opportunity to grow.
I think hotelier leadership needs to come to restaurant conventions, conferences.
Yes.
If you're listening to this and you're in the hotel business because you follow Scott, if you don't go to Restaurant Leadership Conference in Scottsdale, Arizona every spring, or the National Restaurant Association show in May in Chicago, or even some of the big ones in the UK or about, I think there has to be a better cross-pollination because, I mean, restaurant in general has always been pretty slow on the uptake of technology and new processes and systems. It used to be hotels were well ahead of restaurants as in that regard. And I feel like that coin is flipped, that now it feels like restaurants are way ahead. as especially larger mid-sized brands are way ahead of even major hotel chain brands in technology and the usefulness of technology. Look, I don't count the nights because I don't want to know, but you know, I make a lot of trips every year, right? Like 48 trips last year or something like that. I stay in a lot of hotels, in a lot of cities. And I still choose, I just look for the most unique properties now because at the end of the day, I'm not really taking advantage of any amenities. I just want a really nice, clean, maybe unique environment. Maybe if it's got a good cocktail program when I get back to the room or something. But the proposition is so misaligned now that I don't even think about considering the F&B in a hotel. I'm just going to look for the cool hot spot around the corner, right? I'm going to put myself in the right district to get sort of that right experience. Or if I'm hosting, a dinner or something of that nature, I want to be closer or around something that's very interesting to the guest. So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of work. I think you have a lot of opportunity for customer base helping the hotels see all this opportunity, Scott. It's been really awesome having you on. We always wrap these up with some quick, quippy questions. So for you, I'll take it over to your side of the pond so we can all learn something. What would be, if I'm coming to London,
Hmm.
what would be a top restaurant or dining experience I should think about, getting you to help me get a reservation at?
Do you know, it's funny. There's a few of the guys who've come over from the US, and I've shared some Google saved places with them from this one. Do you know, there's a couple of mine that are go-tos. There's a Thai restaurant which is street food called Kiln. It's right in the middle of Soho here, but they still cook everything over coal. So whether it's the noodles in pots or whether it's your meat or your fish, everything's still cooked as you would expect to find in Thailand. So it's a phenomenal experience, real great value. There's the Big Mama Group Italian. If you want cool Italian and you want a kind of super Instagrammable design, food is really, really cool as well. So a big shout out to the Big Mama Group. And I'll probably have forgotten loads. And when I'm sitting there downstairs now, I'll probably be thinking of loads more gems. But yeah, there's those are the other ones. Who else could we say? I'm going to shout out. There's some amazing bakeries now in London, as I
Mm,
think there is starting to get everywhere as well. So we opened a bakery called Chestnut Bakery a couple of years ago. They're still doing amazingly well. They got best croissant of the year as well. Jolene, Dusty Knuckle, Pophams, all some amazing bakeries there. So you've got breakfast. You can go and have some pasta for lunch and then Thai for dinner.
there you go. The whole day mapped out for
Exactly.
you when you go to London. Uh, what's one word that we Yanks say that just drives you nuts? That we've just completely butchered the language because we know the English language was invented by you guys over there. What's a word that you just every time we say it, you just cringe, your knuckles just whiten because you can't stand the fact that we've butchered it so bad.
Do you know, I'll tell you a story because I don't really get offended that much. I'm good with it. Is when I first worked for Marriott, as I mentioned, we were part of the American business, and when I first turned up, I'm from the north of England, so we don't talk particularly well anyway, which is why I can't criticize anyone. But I turned up 19 years old, fresh out of Yorkshire, and turned up in London, had the dizzy heights. So I was already a bit out of my comfort zone. And I'll never forget looking at the room service menu the first time and seeing arugula on the menu. And I had never heard of this item, product, ingredient ever before. And you know when you have those bits where you're young and you don't really want to ask questions at that point, you've not got lots of confidence. And I must have gone for at least 3 to 4 months thinking of what this arugula was until I found out that here we call it rocket. So it was a rocket salad.
Ah,
But
yes. Yeah,
yeah,
rocket lettuce.
so
Yes.
yeah, exactly. So it always makes me chuckle now. Whenever I see rocket or wherever I see arugula, it always makes me laugh because of that when I was 19 and just didn't have the confidence to ask someone what it was.
Well, I'll say this to all of the operators, especially all the chefs out there, knock it off with the arugula. We don't need any more rocket. All right. It's just overdone. In California,
Yes.
you can't get a burger, a sandwich, or an open face avocado toast. Everything. And by the way, it's a strong flavored item. It's a very peppery, green, and they're piling it on there like, yay thick. Like, come on, enough with the overuse, and definitely, please stop piling it on. It's something that just needs a little couple of sprigs, and you get the flavor
100%.
and the crunch of it. So I beg our industry friends, especially the chefs, back off on the rocket, would you? Well, Scott, always fun, always a pleasure. Really grateful to have been on your show a couple times. Really excited that we got to get you on my show, although years in delay from getting started on my journey, but really glad that you made the time and joined us, and look forward to having you back.
Thanks, Troy.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to The Pineapple Perspective. If you loved today's episode, leave a review and a 5-star rating. I look forward to welcoming you back next time.